Good evening. Welcome to this special broadcast live from the Sky News and Daily Telegraph People's Forum here in Western Sydney. And we've all just seen Anthony Albanese and Peter Dutton go head-to-head in a live debate for the first time. The fuel excise, the Trump shock and the Mediscare campaign were all key moments. Make no mistake, this was a high-stakes debate, and both leaders were polished and on message. Dutton has been on the back foot in the first week of the campaign, and tonight was particularly critical for him. He needed a reset, and we saw that his lines were sharper, including his attacks on Albanese's broken promise of $275 energy bills and on what he calls a dishonest Mediscare campaign. There were also tonight moments of direct combat like this.
Are you the biggest spending government since Whitlam? So 40 years. In 40 years, there has not been a higher spending government than your government. Is that correct?
Well, that's not true, except for the one that you were a part of.
Just not true.
And during COVID, of course it's true. And it's also true that there was a $78 billion deficit.
Now, Dutton hit back again by saying Albanese's was the highest spending government in some 40 years. But then the Prime Minister attacked him for high spending during the pandemic. But Dutton said that the Labor at the time had supported each of those measures. Albanese also had his chance to ask a direct question to Peter Dutton, putting to him, well, how did he plan to pay for his nuclear energy policy? In response, Dutton claimed his energy plan was cheaper than Albanese's.
We could turn back into the domestic market. We can reduce, as the independent analysis has shown, the cost of gas by about 15%, and that means we can bring down the cost of electricity. We can bring down the costs across the economy otherwise, and that is, I think, transformational for our economy, but of course opposed by the Prime Minister.
Well, let's hear from him.
Well, the only gas policy that the coalition have is the gaslighting of the Australian public.
If the renewables are so much cheaper, as the Prime Minister keeps telling you, why has he broken his promise of a $275 a year cut to your electricity bill, when in actual fact it's gone up by $1,300 under this government?
Now, throughout tonight, we saw Peter Dutton use words like dishonest and untruthful to describe the Prime Minister's answers. During the debate, Albanese again got out his Medicare card and promised to get bulk billing rates back to 90%. Well, Dutton responded, and this was a critical moment tonight. He asked if the female undecided voter was able to go to the doctor and only use her Medicare card, or if she needed to take out her credit card as well. Here's that moment and Albanese's response that Dutton tried to introduce a fee to pay for bulk billing.
Can I just ask, please, it's a great question, but can I just ask, what's your experience? So when you go to the doctor that you talk about with the gap fee, do you have to use just your Medicare card, or do you have to use your credit card as well?
I have to use both, because bulk billing doesn't cover the full charge, so I have to pay $70 or $80 extra.
Yeah.
But, Peter, you tried, when you were the Health Minister, you tried to abolish bulk billing by having a fee every time people visit a doctor.
And health came up several times tonight. In fact, within just 10 minutes of the debate, Dutton had called Albanese out on claims that he'd cut funding to health, also on his Mediscare campaign. And he said that these inaccurate claims were, in his words, a desperate measure from a Prime Minister who wanted to be re-elected.
The Prime Minister goes out with this Mediscare campaign and the Education Scare campaign. It is not a truthful statement.
Of course, cost of living is the biggest issue this campaign, and Kieran Gilbert asked Albanese why he wouldn't commit to Dutton's petrol tax cut as well. And the sweeteners on offer this campaign are between Albanese's tax cuts and Dutton's petrol tax relief. One driver, and again, this was one of the biggest moments tonight, one driver expressed support for the fuel excise, saying it works through the supply chain, and he challenged the Prime Minister to match it. He also called for Dutton to extend it for longer than a year.
I'm an owner-driver from Kings Langley up near Blacktown.
Yeah.
It's about the fuel excise. I'm hoping that you can match that from Peter, because I know you've offered tax cuts and that's great, but I believe they're not for 15 months. And to be honest, Mr Prime Minister, people are hurting now, not in 15 months' time. So, you know, the fuel is dialed into everything, not only personally people's cars, but for me and other truck drivers, it makes the supply chain cheaper and cheaper and cheaper if fuel's less. And I'll say to Peter too, if you've only promised it for 12 months, extend it. Extend it for 3 years. Extend it for the whole term.
Now, Donald Trump is the dominant figure looming over this election campaign, and he came up early in the debate, the very first question.
When you impose tariffs, it's a tax on the country that is imposing it. So Americans will pay more for the goods that they purchase from overseas, and that will have an impact here.
I know that we can deal with whatever comes our way. I think one of the great things about living in the greatest country in the world is that whatever is thrown at us, the Prime Minister of the day should have the ability and the strength of character to be able to stand up.
Now, tonight, these were all audience questions that the leaders couldn't prepare for. They didn't know what the audience of 100 undecided voters were going to ask. And not long before the debate began, Peter Dutton received the news that his father had had a medical emergency, a suspected heart attack. That was a shock just minutes before the debate began, and which no doubt would have rattled the opposition leader. Now, we're going to find out the audience verdict shortly as to who won the debate. I've also got analysis from Ray Hadley and Bronwyn Bishop in a moment.